Shura is the best villain in Eden Zero. At least that's what most people are gonna tell you. And you would be totally within your rights if you said that this half-squid emo kid... Wait, did we ever figure out what's going on with this overdrive? Anyway, beside the point. If you say Shura is your favorite villain in Eden Zero, and even in all of Hiro Mashima's manga, then there's plenty of reason to see why that would be the case. But he's not exactly the god-tier villain that some people make him out to be. That's why in this video, I want to explain why Shura is a great example of how to write a villain, but also discuss the one thing that stopped him from becoming a truly perfect villain. Be warned that this will contain spoilers. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your thoughts on Shura. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment goes to Maggie D, who shared their thoughts on One Punch Man. If you'd like more Eden Zero and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. So before we take a look at Shura and what he does well as a villain, it's important that we start by discussing what every villain needs. And this is something I've addressed in a bunch of my Dr. Stone videos, so I'll just give you the two fundamentals. First, every villain needs to pose a threat or to challenge the main character. They're put in the story to oppose the main character and give them an obstacle as part of the plot. So how well they can do that will naturally have a direct impact on the rest of the story. Second, every villain needs to be a great character. If the author doesn't spend enough time fleshing out the villain so that they're not just this one-dimensional actor in the story, then it makes their motivation seem uninteresting and in some cases actually undermines the threat they pose to others. So now that we've discussed our standard, let's look at what Shura does well as a villain. I don't have to tell you that Shura was clearly a threat in the story. Literally, no question. Yes, there is some question of how he would hold up against top-tier fighters like Nero or Ziggy, but that's really more of a technical question. Without a doubt, Shura created tension in pretty much every panel he was in. Take his introduction, for example. You see this girl anxious over the fact that she didn't answer the phone when Shura called her. You get this sense that it's not going to turn out well, and all of a sudden you're watching these poor girls fly up, and oh god, they're dead. And like, that's one of the more casual things we've seen Shura do. He's just this messed up dude that makes you nervous about what he's gonna do to the other characters. And, like I already mentioned, he's also shown to be incredibly powerful. Shura, like Shiki, can pretty much do whatever he wants with his gravity ether. I mean, he literally stopped the Eden Zero like he was some kind of Jedi Master. And how can anyone forget the way he squished Shiki's eye just to mess with him? Of course, there's also the way he serves as the perfect foil to Shiki. Because while Shura obviously served as an obstacle in Shiki's mission to save the Aoi cosmos, he also served as a challenge to Shiki's beliefs. Shiki had always cried for the sake of others and treated each life like it was special, but Shura is this guy who treats everyone like they're expendable. So when Shiki confronts Shura, he's forced to face this question of whether his worldviews are as meaningful as he thinks they are, or if he's really just being naive. Without Shura, we never would have had this scene where Shura plays into Shiki's bit of asking to be friends, and Shiki, for the first time, honestly turns it down. Then we have this beautiful ending to their fight, where Shura claims that you have to step on people to get to the top, and Shiki says that he's just working to move forward. It's such a great look into what makes Shiki a unique character. It gives you a perfect idea of his motivations, and it's only because he was forced to overcome the antithesis of everything he stands for. So we can see that Shura is clearly a threat, both in the plot and to the beliefs that define Shiki's character. It's because Shura is such a maniac that he's able to create this tension and keep your eyes glued to each page. But this behavior of his is also something that makes us love his character. Well, I mean, we hate him, but we love him. We love to hate him, because everyone wants to punch Shura in the face. He's a classically evil villain who was constantly doing messed up stuff just for the sake of doing it. And he's also a master in the art of trolling. For example, after he beats Shiki, Shura goes and beats up the Shining Stars. He could have just as easily just finished them off, but instead decides to kidnap Witch. This leads to the iconic panel where Shiki finally finds Witch, the chapter ends, and we all had to wait a week to find out if Shura had actually killed her. Shura did all of this purely to troll Shiki. And there's plenty of other crap he pulls, like making those innocent robots self-destruct, or those walkies that Ajuna felt the need to overshare with Laguna. Point is, everyone who reads this arc says the same thing. Man, I really hope they punch this guy in the face. Which is a sign that he's a great character. Because if Shura can evoke this kind of raw anger, then that means he's getting you invested in the story. And it works, because watching Shiki finally crush Shura is one of the most satisfying moments in the entire story. Which is exactly what villains are designed to do. Oppose the main character for the sake of the plot and make the end of that struggle feel meaningful. So then, if Shura is such a great villain, what is it that he's missing? What's the one little thing that places him just short of a perfect villain? Well, as I'm sure you're well aware, there tends to generally be two kinds of villains. The philosophical ones that really don't seem all that evil, or the ones who are absolute dicks. Of course, there's a spectrum for this thing, and those are just the two extremes. But that's more or less what tends to happen. The rational villains tend to be more human, while the classically evil villains tend to have almost zero redeeming qualities. Now, you can have a great villain on either end of the spectrum, but what makes a perfect villain is careful balancing of these qualities. Take Tsukasa from Dr. Stone, for example. Tsukasa is a great villain because he poses a major threat to the main characters, and he also has this rational philosophy that reflects his gentle nature. But he's almost too gentle, to the point where it almost feels like he's only a villain by a technicality. In contrast, you have villains like Dr. Mueller who have zero redeeming qualities to the point that they're just cartoonishly evil. He's definitely evil, but it's just unrealistic. Because here's the thing. It's one thing if, like, a demon or a mad scientist does something evil. It's nothing unusual. But it's when real people do evil things that you're actually terrified. Because if the villain feels like a real person, then the evil things they do feel that much more real and threatening, as opposed to the cartoonishly evil villains that are just detached from reality. And this idea of feeling like a real person is something that immediately came up after the death of Shura. When he died and we got that scene between him and Ajuna, there were people that said they were put off because it seemed like a last-second attempt to make Shura sympathetic. But other people claim that it was only meant to humanize him, not to suddenly redeem his character. And that's what's going on, because by no means does this make up for all the crap he pulled. But it at least shows you that, like any real person, Shura was flawed and had this inner struggle between how he viewed himself versus how he acted around others. So while Shura is a classically evil villain, we do see Mashima balance that with some human qualities. But the issue is that we don't get anything like that before his death. All we really ever see is the one evil side of him. We do see him open up to friendship with Shiki, but we all know how Shura treats his friends. And we do see that in some messed up way he can be a goofy dude who's willing to laugh, but that only builds onto his personality as a troll. Shura is far from being one-dimensional like Dr. Mueller, but we really only see one side to his character until he dies. That death does affect our perception of him, but it doesn't influence how we see everything else he does the first time we read this arc. And this is actually something that Mashima did better with Draken Joe. Draken Joe is an evil character, but he has a bunch of different qualities to him that make him feel like a more realistic person. He shows time and time again how incredibly greedy he is, but we also get scenes like this where he understands that he has to give the people who work for him some kind of payout. We see that Draken Joe is a viciously violent person who has no problem torturing people, but he's not so violent that he forgets about his business interests and isn't willing to make deals with people. On top of all that, as smart and as calculating as he can be, Draken Joe is also someone whose pride and arrogance can get the better of him. Like Shura, we don't really get his background until later, but it's these dynamic qualities we see in Draken Joe that make him feel like a real person as we're following everything he does. The result is that the conflict between Shiki and Draken Joe isn't just your typical battle of good and evil. It's a chaotic struggle between real people. Draken Joe spares Rebecca and Homura but mutilates Wise just to scare the others. Then, after all of his talk of how he never kills people, he kills Shiki right in front of Rebecca, claiming it was because he defied his authority. You never would have had a scene like this if it weren't for those conflicting qualities we discussed earlier. He's not that easy to understand, which leads you to become more invested in his character in an instinctive attempt to understand why he does things, and what he'll do next. In other words, you're not just invested in what Draken Joe does, you're also invested in Draken Joe himself. So to come back to Shura, you just don't see that. You're focused on like, what's gonna happen to which, or how can Shiki beat Shura? Now, admittedly, Draken Joe has the advantage of more build-up, but that's kind of my point. Let's say Shura didn't die and he was in the next arc. Without any additional characterization, he just wouldn't have the same kind of longevity as Draken Joe, because his being a troll would eventually get old. And that's what I mean when I say Shura is just short of a perfect villain. He's this terrifying, goofy troll who's always creating tension and forces Shiki to grow. But as far as his character goes, there isn't really enough to make you want to understand him, because you only ever see this one side of him. His final scene does humanize his character, but it still doesn't change how you invest in him as you're reading the story for the first time. And even when you do reread it, it's not like that scene completely changes how you view his actions. So, as great as he was for the purposes of the Aoi War arc, Shura just falls short of a truly perfect villain. And that's it for this discussion. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to like the video. Don't forget to comment with your thoughts on Shura down below. And if you'd like more Eden Zero and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.